can now start the new item in the agenda, the CEO Caucus on building diversified and resilient solar value chains, Europe and ISA perspectives. Solar PV has become central to the global clean energy transition, but its value chains remain exposed to concentration risks, trade disruptions, financial constraints, and limited industrial coordination. The CEO Caucus provides a platform to discuss how Europe, India, leaders, and ISA member countries can work together to be the trusted, competitive, circular, and geographically diversified solar manufacturing ecosystems. I invite participants to share practical perspectives, ideas on industrial partnerships, circularity, financing, technology transfers to strengthen resilient solar value chain. I am pleased now to give the floor to Dr. Gurleen Kaur of the ISA Secretariat to run the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and a very warm welcome to Brussels once again. I'm Dr. Gurleen Kaur, and I lead ISA's Technology Roadmap Policy Pillar, and I would be your MC for today's discussion. So this morning's high-level strategic roundtable, as mentioned by the chair as well, focuses on a critical pillar of global energy transition. How do we build resilient, trusted, diversified, and future-ready solar value chains? So recent geopolitical developments have reminded us that energy security and industrial resilience are increasingly interconnected. As we welcome the electrification target to raise the share of energy demand from electricity from 20% to 35% by 2035, by the COP presidency, the ability to access technologies, equipment, skilled workforce, finance, and sustainable manufacturing ecosystems have also become a very, very strategic priority right now. So this roundtable will bring a unique combination of policymakers, industry leaders who are sitting amongst us, research organizations, and very international partners to explore how Europe and ISA member countries can collaborate to shape the next phase of global solar industrial development. So we are particularly grateful for all our distinguished speakers, guests, and participants for joining today. So to set the discussion in motion, I would like to invite Director General ISA, Mr. Ashish Khanna, to please share his opening remarks for the session. Mr. Khanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gurleen. Excellencies, industry leaders, colleagues, and partners. Solar energy is no longer an alternative. It's the backbone of the global energy transition. We all have seen that how almost more than 3 terawatts worldwide has been installed. And yet the deeper question before us today is not how fast we deploy solar, but also how securely we build it. Because today, while demand for solar is global, manufacturing is not. The concentration of critical stages of the photovoltaic value chain, from polysilicon to wafer, cell, equipment, and specifically materials, including going beyond the solar PV to now looking at inverters and cybersecurity, exposes Europe and the entire global south to structural vulnerabilities. Price shocks, logistics disruptions, trade barriers, or geopolitical tensions can immediately slow deployment in very countries that need solar the most. For many developing countries, solar is not just climate policy, it is energy access, it is economic resilience, it is development and economic sovereignty. And therefore, supply chain diversification is not a protectionist agenda. It is a development imperative. At the International Solar Alliance, we see diversification not as fragmentation, but as a distributed strength. We envision a future where solar manufacturing ecosystems are more geographically balanced, technologically collaborative, and economically inclusive. A future where emerging economies are not only markets for solar deployment, but competitive hubs for manufacturing, innovation, and value addition. A future where Europe's technology depth, engineering excellence, and capital equipments can partner with the scale, demand, and industrial ambition of the global south. But diversification will not happen organically. It requires three strategic shifts. First, moving from a transactional trade to long-term industrial ecosystem partnerships, including joint manufacturing, co-development, and shared innovation platforms. Second, and this is where ISA's role is very important, aligning standards, certification, and quality frameworks so that diversified manufacturing is globally trusted and globally bankable. And third, de-risking upstream investments through coordinated policy signals, blended finance and innovative financing mechanisms, and institutional collaboration. This is where ISA's role becomes critical. ISA is uniquely positioned as a bridge between governments and industry, between technology leaders and emerging markets, between ambition and implementation. Today's discussion is therefore extremely important, so I warmly invite each of you to participate wholeheartedly in this session. Please speak candidly, challenge ourselves, challenge ISA, challenge assumptions, but please do offer solutions, identify the structural platforms and changes that are required. Let us use this platform not just to exchange views, but to shape the next phase of the solar manufacturing ecosystem. And ISA stands ready to convene, catalyze, and coordinate that transformation. Thank you very much. Back to you, Gurleen.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Khanna, for anchoring today's context and reminding us that robust international cooperation and aligned industrial frameworks are very, very vital to sustaining global solar momentum that we are all talking about today. So moving forward, I'm delighted to invite our next esteemed speaker to provide special remarks. So please welcome Mr. Jean-Francois Gagné, Head of Clean Energy Ministerial. Jean, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gurleen. Thank you very much, DG Khanna, for the kind invitation for the Clean Energy Ministerial to be here today. For those who may not know, the Clean Energy Ministerial is a voluntary platform, so we're not a treaty-based organization, but we do have membership of over 29 countries who represent more than 90% of global energy investments and bring together stakeholders from both the global north and the global south. And really what we do is we help these countries find ways to collaborate in terms of taking down barriers to the clean energy transition. We do that through a double approach, which is top-down and bottom-up, where we have every year a ministerial meeting in different regions of the world to be able to bring stakeholders and give the highest political impetus to the transition. But throughout the year, we also manage 25 working groups that basically address issues spanning the clean energy spectrum, whether it's on the supply side, solar, geothermal, bioenergy, nuclear, but also on the demand side, transport, heavy industry, as well as the connecting aspect, whether it's on infrastructure, but also socioeconomic aspects like skills, like inclusivity, like long-term planning. And so basically over the past few years, we've been looking at how we help bring energy ministers together to find ways to address barriers to clean energy investment in the power sector. And we basically come up with 40 different actions that our members are taking under 6 different pillars. One is on planning and regulations, making sure that we have the long-term planning and the regulatory framework to support that. The second one is making sure that infrastructure is flexible and also what we can do in terms of expanding, modernizing, and digitalizing grids. Then we also look at the demand sectors. We've heard about the Electrify Now aspect. We've been working on the different demand aspects for a long time. We look at also the people aspects, skills, inclusivity, but also very importantly, we address supply chains. And on that, we've been really looking at doing a lot more work into that more recently. And again, our view from there is the holistic approach. We heard this morning about, the transition transcends more than one. It's not just energy minister, you need infrastructure minister, you need industrial ministers, you need finance ministers to all have a common vision. So be able to think holistically in terms of the planning of that aspect. Making sure regulators are here and basically are able to provide the regulatory tools to ensure supply chain resilience. You know, that right now, in terms of what you can stock in terms of different components is rate-based, and you need to basically look at how regulatory frameworks can help in that respect. And not to forget that the people are a major part of that supply chain, and make sure that we have the skills and the workforce in that area. So we've been collaborating with ISA, other stakeholders. I see IRENA, UNIDO, World Bank here to address some of these issues. We've released a few reports on cost modeling for supply chains in terms of how to do that, but also how collaboration actually can help, you know, advance this. So for this, really looking forward to today's discussion, really hear the call for that collaboration. That collaboration has multiple dimensions. It is government to government. It's making sure that internationally we can create those partnerships that will provide sustainable and reliable supply chains. But it's also government and industry, making sure that there is an opportunity for sustainable economic development in terms of the setting up of these supply chains. And it is also making, collaboration with local stakeholders, making sure that these supply chains provide as much domestic value as possible. So really hoping to hear from this, really hope that we can continue that discussion when we go to Riyadh from October 11 to 13 to our ministerial, and hope to see many of you there to continue that discussion then. Thank you.
Thank you so much, JF, for those insightful remarks and for the continued collaboration between SEM and ISA on various initiatives that we have been working on. So, ladies and gentlemen, a key milestone of today's gathering is the launch of an important knowledge resource that advances our shared vision of sustainability and circularity in the clean energy transition. It is my privilege to announce that we are about to launch our first knowledge product under the Sunrise platform by ISA, which is Battery Recycling Guidelines for ISA member countries, advancing circular battery value chains. This report has been developed through extensive consultations with 123 stakeholders from 24 plus countries. These guidelines provide a practical framework to support ISA member countries in strengthening battery recycling ecosystems, fostering international collaboration, and promoting sustainable battery lifecycle management. As battery deployment accelerates worldwide, circularity will be essential to ensuring that today's clean energy solutions do not become tomorrow's waste challenges. Through this publication, ISA reaffirms its commitment to helping countries transform end-of-life batteries into valuable resources and build resilient circular value chains. With that, I invite our distinguished dignitaries to officially launch the report. Mr. Khanna, DG ISA, Mr. Gagne, Head CEM, Chair of RCM Europe, Italy, Mr. Perzola, and Professor Jan Marius Peters, Honorary Advisor to ISA's Program on Solar PV and Battery Waste Management and Sunrise, to please be part of the official launch. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, please join me in congratulating ISA team and partners involved in development of this important publication. This report will undoubtedly serve as an essential roadmap for building sustainable low-carbon value chains across member countries. Can I have a huge round of applause for the team? Thank you. And now we'll move to the next segment, which is the context setting segment. On your tables, you would find brief notes summarizing key insights from recent ISA's consultations, including discussions at ISA's regional committee meetings last year and industry dialogues that held during Intersolar this year. These consultations revealed a common message. The challenge is no longer defining the need for diversified solar supply chains, but accelerating industrial execution through stronger partnerships, finances, and coordinated action. And to set the scene, we have a presentation. Can we please have the presentation? Yeah. So, 3 years ago, ISA initiated this conversation because we recognized that solar supply chains had become a very strategic issue for energy transition. At that time, the question was fairly very simple. How do we reduce the concentration risk? And today, however, the question has evolved with a lot of geopolitical uncertainty. How do we build resilient solar ecosystems capable of supporting a secure, affordable, and sustainable energy future? So as you can see in the slides, the global solar story is one of remarkable success, as we have discussed. The demand is rapidly globalizing, 3 terawatt installed across the globe. Countries across Europe, Africa, Asia, Latin America are accelerating deployment at an unprecedented pace. And we also heard some of our member countries talk about huge demand in their countries and how they are moving. Yet, the supply base serving this demand remains highly concentrated, mostly in a single country. As this slide illustrates, the upstream manufacturing for polysilicon, wafers, cells, modules remain overwhelmingly concentrated in a single geography. 1,500 gigawatt of polysilicon, 1,200 gigawatt of wafer, 1,600 gigawatt of cell, and 300 gigawatt of module manufacturing capacities come from a single country. Battery supply chains also exhibit similar trends. This mismatch between concentrated supply and increasingly distributed demand creates a very systemic exposure that we're about to talk about. And these recent events in the Strait of Hormuz have reminded us how real these risks are and how these could lead to energy security and also inflation in many countries. Geopolitical tensions, disruptions in Middle East, shipping constraints, and logistic bottlenecks, as highlighted here, have translated into delays, cost of escalation, and uncertainty for developers and investors alike. Supply chains have therefore become more than an industrial issue, and now they are an energy security issue. Okay. Okay. So the encouraging news is that the diversification has started. Manufacturing capacity is emerging in new regions. Countries are introducing industrial strategies and incentive mechanisms. Demand centers are expanding rapidly, particularly across global souths, as you can see in this slide as well. However, these efforts remain fragmented. As you can see, there are certain high growth areas in certain parts of global south, but then these are also certainly concentrated in that area. So, through ISA's consultation with governments, industry leaders, and international organizations, several common themes have emerged. No region can build supply chains alone. Industry faces uncertain demand signals. Investments require predictable returns as well, as our private sector shares with us. Manufacturers face skill shortages and financing constraints. Meanwhile, the policy fragmentation risks creating inefficiencies and duplication. In other words, challenge is no longer whether diversification is necessary. The challenge is how we coordinate diversification effectively. So, over the last few years, ISA has developed elevated supply chains onto the global agenda. We have developed knowledge products, built communities of practice, and strengthened understanding of resilience challenges. But perhaps the most important lesson is that the challenge itself has evolved. Solar is no longer simply about deploying modules. It has become critical infrastructure. Storage is becoming inseparable from deployment because we are talking about co-location, specifically in the area or times of DRE. Circularity is emerging as a strategic necessity. Software, power electronics, system intelligence increasingly now determines resilience. Therefore, the diversification also must evolve, from diversifying supply chains to building resilient solar ecosystems. So much of today's discussion in the supply chains area still focuses on geography, where modules are produced, where the cells are produced, where batteries are produced. These questions remain important, but geography alone reduces supply risk. It does not necessarily deliver system resilience, which is very important. ISA therefore proposes thinking about diversification across 3 dimensions. First, yes, we acknowledge we need to diversify geographically, expand sourcing regions. Second is technological diversification, encouraging multiple technology pathways, including emerging technologies like perovskites, BIPV, and also design for circularity. And third, functional or component level diversification, strengthening resilience across the components that actually keep the system operating. This broader perspective better reflects the complexity of modern energy systems. This brings us to what I believe is the most important message of today's presentation. And I don't know why the colors here look very different from how I prepared them. So the idea here is we need to reframe solar, not simply as a manufacturing value chain, but as a critical energy infrastructure. As you can see on the slides, the bottom of this stack still sits very familiar components as polysilicon, wafers, cells, and modules. And these account for 50% of the plant capex and remains exposed to concentration and volatility. But moving upwards the stack, as you can see, we find components that increasingly determine reliability and resilience. Physical BOS, energy buffers, inverters, battery management systems, protection devices, power electronics, inverters, and even energy management systems and forecasting tools. AI-enabled dispatch and cybersecurity is also very important in this infrastructure stack, which though represents a relatively small share of cost, but has disproportionate impact on reliability when we're talking about kill switches in terms of today's day and era. So the future of power systems will depend just as much on these layers as it does on the energy generation component and the modules. And importantly, these are the areas where many countries, including European partners and ISA member countries, can participate meaningfully when we're talking about diversification. So not every country will manufacture wafers, but every country can contribute somewhere in this entire solar infrastructure stack. And let me bring about another way of explaining this. So this supply chain really talks about the paradox that we're talking about. The highest supply risk remains concentrated in manufacturing, as you can see in the bottommost line, and it is marked by the red dot. So, yet the functioning of the energy system increasingly depends upon the higher layers. As you can see, we move from medium to green, to orange to green, and green is the lowest supply concentration as well, as we can see. So the future of diversification strategies cannot simply stop at manufacturing. They must encompass the entire system. This includes storage integration, power electronics, digitalization, system intelligence, and increasingly AI, as you can see. So the supply concentration is the lowest in the AI level, system intelligence level, but that's the area where we have to focus the most in terms of managing the entire grids, modernization, and areas. Now the question is, where do we go from here? So ISA proposes 3 priorities. First, shift the approach. Move beyond geography, led diversification. and move towards ecosystem-led resilience. Second, expand the scope. Diversification should encompass storage, power electronics, digital control, and emerging technologies, which means both technological and functional level diversification. Third, align market signals. Industry cannot invest without certainty. So this requires coordinated policy frameworks, innovation financial instruments, and stronger public partnerships. Perhaps most importantly, we must bring industry into this conversation, not as observers, but as co-creators. And that is our effort that we are going to discuss today with industry as part of the CEO Caucus. A consortium-based approach involving governments, manufacturers, financiers, technology providers, and developers, in our opinion, can help translate ambition to implementation. And allow me to conclude with one final reflection, and this is reflection from my end, having worked in the area of supply chains, manufacturing for a very long time. As per our group, the first phase of energy transition was about deploying renewable energy at scale. The next phase will be about ensuring that these systems are resilient, intelligent, circular, and secure, most importantly. Europe and ISA has this very unique opportunity to shape this future together through collaboration on strategic supply chains and through partnerships that ensure benefits of this transition reach all regions of the world. Because ultimately, our objective is not simply to diversify where components are produced, but it is to build resilient ecosystems that strengthen energy security, support economic competitiveness, and accelerate climate action. Our globe is shared, our sun is shared, and the climate challenges that we face are shared as well. The solutions, therefore, must be shared too. Thank you. So, building on these discussions, as I mentioned, so this is ISA's point of view. Dahlberg Advisors, it's an international organization, an international private sector consultancy company. They undertook a review of policy and industrial landscape in Europe and India to identify opportunities for deeper collaboration, cooperation, and resilience manufacturing partnerships as well. So now it is my distinct pleasure to invite Mr. Jagjit Sareen, partner, Dahlberg Advisors, to present key findings of his analysis on Europe and policy systems across Europe, India, and UK. Mr. Sareen, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At the outset, let me thank Honorable Chair from Italy, ISA Director General, Excellencies, corporate leaders, and colleagues in the room for giving us this opportunity to present our analysis on the subject matter you are discussing. In the last two interventions and the presentation you have made, Dr. Kaur, it's very clear why diversification is needed. And I think there is no need to relitigate the case for a variety of reasons. What I'm going to present to you is a business case that diversification is possible. At Dahlberg, which is a co-host of Bharat Climate Forum, a national climate collaboration platform out of Delhi, is looking at this diversification agenda across the clean tech sectors, solar, wind, batteries, EVs, green hydrogen, and transmission equipment. And the presentation today I'm going to make brings an economic case of supply chain linkages between India, EU, and the UK. Go back. Okay. In terms of the policy landscape, creating enabling environment for domestic manufacturing, but also collaboration of linking these supply chains is there, whether it's PLIs from India or the approved list of module manufacturers, the NZIA or the proposed Industrial Acceleration Act in the EU, or similar policy pronouncements and tariff and non-tariff barriers coming out of the UK, provide the protection and the financial and non-financial incentives for industry to take forward the manufacturing agenda. These need to translate into clear numbers, and that's what our analysis is suggesting. As you look at this graph, in terms of the demand, this is annualized demand based on targets for India, EU, and the UK, as per the NDC targets and domestic legislations. If you look at the annualized targets, the current manufacturing capacity and the planned manufacturing capacity, you clearly see that there is excess production capacity on few components happening in India, while there is unmet demand in the EU and UK, which would traditionally be met by a single source, while there is excess capacity coming from an additional source, which is India in this case. If you look component by component from polysilicon, ingot wafer, solar cells, modules, and also silver paste and solar glass, you see that in cumulative terms as well, India could serve as another manufacturing hub to diversify the supply chain risk, which currently European Union and UK are facing in terms of these components. Next one. In aggregate terms, our analysis suggests, please go back and slide. Back. Next slide from the analysis. Yes, this one. Thank you. So our analysis suggests that currently in India, you have about 130 gigawatts of overcapacity, which could meet the projected demand coming out of the EU and the UK in a price competitive manner. And here, let me provide a concrete data point from our analysis, which makes the business case that diversification is possible even in current circumstances. So in specific point, what we are articulating before you is that with EU policies like NZIA and the proposed Industrial Accelerator Act that are encouraging sources from non-China countries willing to accommodate a cost premium of about 20 to 25%, which is as part of the European current law and practice, Indian manufacturers would be able to meet this cost threshold for most of the components, including wafers and cells. While relatively more expensive than the Chinese manufacturers and the landed price in EU, India at least could manufacture and export these components at a price point 25 to 30% cheaper than what Europe could manufacture at cost parity. So what we are saying is, while for both countries, China may be a cheaper source to import, but India could be that diversification point for EU and UK to import these components from India at a cheaper price than what EU can manufacture. And these prices fit well within the agreed cost premiums European regulators have agreed to provide. So essentially what we are saying here is that in terms of modules and cells, India could provide that capacity based on what Indian manufacturers are already producing or plan to produce. Even on ingot wafer, the case is much more positive. What could EU and the UK provide to strengthen this diversification process with India as a country in the discussion as we're having today? Europe has polysilicon process technology, plus the manufacturing equipment, which if could be partnered with India, could help diversification from end to end, from upstream down to module diversification at a cost competitive range, very much possible in the current domestic policy environment, in the current trade environment, and in the current energy price environment. Next slide, please. While we talk about the current environment within the umbrella of the trade agreement between EU, India, UK, India, which is being operationalized, we have also looked at what are the broader opportunities of strengthening the manufacturing ecosystem between these two countries and EU as a region and India. These range from technology readiness, whereas Gurleen was also mentioning about perovskites, but there are other components and technology options where these collaborations could work in terms of technology readiness, including copper metallization technology. And Indian progress on HJT infrastructure could be utilized by the European manufacturers to build upon. Similarly, in strengthening the manufacturing ecosystem, there are specialized European equipments from reactors, crystalline pullers, and others which could be brought to India. Similarly, one should think about joint validation facilities. A point which is worth repeating on quality and standards. I think Indian manufacturers could meet European quality standards if these things are done and designed jointly in terms of broad alignment on import-export components and joint traceability and CBAM compliance systems. We believe that done jointly and efficiently through ICT technologies, there is efficiencies to be gained and be cost competitive as we move forward. Next slide. As we look at these opportunities, I must caution that these opportunities would not just arrive by themselves. If that was the case, we won't be discussing this agenda today. Essentially, there are three buckets of issues, starting from collaboration on R&D and co-development. And you'll see on the slide some concrete suggestions, including on supporting upgrades in manufacturing ecosystem and harmonizing quality standards. I would want to emphasize the suggestion or action item which Gurleen presented in our last slide, which is on the turnkey consortium of an integrated solar value chain, where you bring players from both sides, including from Japan and Australia for upstream raw material. We should also look at long-term supply agreements between Indian manufacturer and EU OEMs for various components and technologies, including on inverter SMT lines. And working through all these agendas, which sit very well within the mandate of recently agreed cooperation agreements, trade agreements, and bilateral agreements, these are more implementation agenda where you need a trilateral, if you will, between G to G and bringing business together in a collaborative format to realize the business case which we presented today to you. Thanks. Good. So with this, I would conclude my presentation and thank you for your kind attention. But the headline message I want to leave with you is that if EU, UK, and India can come together, there is an immediate commercial and business opportunity for solar value chain diversification. I thank you for your attention.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Serene. Thank you, Mr. Serene, for presenting a case for India-EU partnership in the areas of supply chain diversification and also highlighting how we can further develop the turnkey consortium we have been talking about. Thank you. So now we have arrived at the centerpiece of today's program. At ISA, representing more than 120 countries, we definitely see growing interest from member countries to develop domestic manufacturing capabilities as well, which can strengthen upstream industries, build local workforces, and participate more meaningfully in global value chains. And Europe possesses world-class expertise in advanced technologies, manufacturing equipment, process engineering, standards, innovations, recycling, and workforce development, all the areas that Mr. Sareen has highlighted. So the question before us is that how do we actually translate these strengths into practical industrial partnerships that can accelerate diversified manufacturing ecosystems globally? So, dear friends, I think now this is time for very interesting discussions. So, as a reminder, this discussion that we're going to have now is under Chatham House rules to facilitate an open solution-driven exchange. And soon I will open the floor to our participants. But before we do that, I would want to make this interactive, so we will use several live polls throughout the session. So let's begin. Please take your phones out. And my colleague online, Anshul, can you please share the first poll? We are going to use Mentimeter. Yes. Please take your phones out and scan this QR code. And the first question is, how are you today? Yes. You have to go to menti.com and code for this is 83636265. Scan this. Yeah. 8363. 8363 6265 is the code. And most people are feeling great, good, excellent, fine, decaffeinated, excited, golden. Amazing. How are you today? I'm doing very well. Thank you. Okay. So, we now know how to use this thing. Let's move to the next poll. The question here is, what is the biggest bottleneck to scaling upstream manufacturing outside existing dominant regions? And I know I moved pretty quickly from how are you to proper technical questions, but the options here are technology access, skilled workforce, financing, raw materials, policy certainty. Great. Most people, 36% people think it is about policy certainty. Great. So yes, we have a case for the consortium. Okay. So now, dear friends, I think I will move on to the discussion segment. Okay, so 39% think it is the policy certainty, followed by a tie between technology access, financing, raw materials. And last is the skilled workforce. Thank you for sharing your opinion. Now we will move to the discussion segment, and my question would be to Dr. Anatolios, who is from IEA, International Energy Agency. So IEA has repeatedly highlighted the concentration risks within the solar manufacturing. So Dr. Anatolios, from your perspective, how important is supply chain diversification for long-term energy transition security, and where do you see the greatest vulnerabilities today?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for letting me present here a little bit our findings that we've done, that we've collected at the IEA. As you know, one of our main goals is to track different energy sources, among others renewable energy. So my name is Vasilios Anatolitis Pelka from the Renewable Energy Division of the IEA. And there, as you might know, we track the deployment of renewable energies and provide forecasts and other types of deployment. And among others, it's not only the capacities that we track in the future, but also different other topics, among others, curtailment of renewables and related challenges, also the types of remuneration and policies driving those renewables, but also, of course, manufacturing capacities all around the world. And all of these you can find in our flagship publication, which is the Renewables Market Report. And I want to share some of those highlights and also the importance of manufacturing that you can actually find in there as well. So just to give you a little bit some data points on that, in 2025, solar PV has actually led the renewables growth for the 23rd consecutive year. So you see, solar PV is one of the major renewable energy technologies. 2025 has also been 12% higher than in 2024. And if we look at 2030, in total, we expect the world to add more than 4,600 gigawatts of renewables, which will actually double our current installed capacity, and we will add roughly the equivalent of the Chinese, European Union's, and Japanese total power generation capacity, just until 2030. And solar PV will actually make up 80% of those capacity additions. So you see, the capacity we're going to see in the next couple of years is dramatic. It's quite strong. And if we look at the countries, China is expected to lead this growth, and actually, despite the slowdown in annual deployment that we're currently seeing there, but the EU and India are following. They're actually even accelerating and are on track to meet their 2030 targets. In the US, policy shifts hamper the growth, as you all know, so there is a little bit of an issue. In any case, looking at the manufacturing capacities that we also track, also with a view to 2030, we see there is a PV supply glut that leads actually to record low module prices, which is actually unlikely to ease by 2030. Please, if you don't agree with me, I'm happy to hear later on your views on that. We always like to reshape and rethink our analysis, but so far we see that's going to be actually quite a difficult time in terms of prices, or as consumers, a good thing with lower prices, but as the industry might have an issue with that. But still, in any case, we see that non-Chinese PV module and cell capacities actually grow. We see them growing, while wafers and polysilicon lag behind. And also, as we've seen in the previous interventions, India is actually on its way to become one of the main manufacturing hubs outside of China. And as I mentioned before, we also track policies and remuneration schemes. So one of these topics was actually to track the non-price criteria in renewable energy auctions. As you know, renewable energy auctions are the main procurement mechanism worldwide and will continue to be so until 2030. And we tracked the non-price criteria that can be a proxy for also driving domestic demand for domestically produced solar PV modules. And in this case, we found out that in 2024, almost 60% of global awarded capacity was awarded under non-price criteria. To be fair, most of this capacity stemmed from India with the ALMM that we saw also in the presentation before, but also Europe and other countries from the Asia-Pacific region are using non-price criteria. Having said that, we are currently working on our newest version of the market report, the Renewables 2026 market report, and there I want to actually push for an update of this non-price criteria to see how it evolves, especially now with Europe moving forward with the Net Zero Industry Act that might and more certainly will trigger several new non-price criteria in auctions here in Europe, and I'm curious to see how this will impact also manufacturing capacities, which are quite important, and in terms of diversification. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anatolius, for your intervention. With this, we'll move to the next segment, which would be industrial speed and consortium-based models. So once again, please take your phones out. We're going to have another Mentimeter poll. Anchal, can you please share the next poll? what is the biggest barrier preventing Europe from becoming a stronger industrial partner in emerging solar manufacturing markets? Fragmented industrial players, limited equipment financing, slow decision-making and execution, lack of market visibility, competition from subsidized suppliers. And the Mentimeter code, once again, is 83636265. Okay. So the highest one that we can see is competition from subsidized suppliers, followed by slow decision-making and execution. Until it would be great if you can please slightly move your cursor. Yes. Thank you. So the highest one is competition from subsidized suppliers, followed by slow decision-making and execution. So thank you for sharing this. This resonates also with one of the strongest messages that we have received from both CEO Caucus and Intersolar discussion, with that the growing gap between European technological excellence and commercial execution speed is one of the things that we need to look at. So with this, I would like to move on to industry, and I would like to call upon Dr. Mehul Raval, who's from RCT Solutions. RCT has extensive experience supporting manufacturing projects globally. So, Dr. Raval, when countries approach Europe looking to establish manufacturing facilities, what are the biggest gaps they encounter? Technology, equipment, financing, or even project execution? Please share your insights on the same.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Dr. Kaur, for the opportunity here. Yeah. So I would just like to go, you can say 15 years back, or say 20 years back, when Europe was, like very high in R&D, and I would say applied R&D. Like, there's a lot of link between the industry and the institutes that was going on. All the funding projects, they were not just academic R&D, but a lot of applied R&D. So I think so this gap, so now this gap has really increased, I would say, a little bit more significantly, that all the R&D which was being funded by the industry, now the industry has died. So I would say the government has to support the industry so that the R&D is alive and being applied to the industry. Yeah. So and then it comes to this as in the poll, that's the execution speed and the policies. So if these mechanisms are not there, then you will always be subject to, you can say, products which are more cheaper from alternative suppliers or manufacturing basis. So if you don't have the policies and you're not interacting or you're not reacting fast, and then this bridge between the industry and the R&D is not there, then it becomes difficult to really sustain, And I think this was really a proud moment for the European community, that the R&D was really, really cool, of high top notch. But now, since there is no support, now it's difficult to even survive for the R&D in Europe, and especially in Germany. So this is where I think it should be again, and also the execution speed has to be really, really fast, in our opinion.
Thank you for sharing that. My next question would be to Dr. Laura Perez, who's from Oxford PV. So, Dr. Laura, we know that Europe remains a global leader in next generation technologies. And with Oxford PV, perovskite tandems have come to the forefront, even the industrial modules. So, according to you, how can emerging manufacturing regions participate in advanced technologies such as tandem cells without repeating the traditional technology transfer model of the past?
There we go. Yes. So, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's very good to participate in the discussion. Just to give a bit of more context into what we do. We are a company that has been developing and now commercializing the next generation solar. We have our R&D and headquarters in the UK and our factory in Germany, which this year is its 10th anniversary. So it's a huge milestone for a solar company in the EU. We have a mission which is making perovskite PV mainstream. So it's not just focusing in the EU, we believe this is the next generation solar and we want to make it mainstream. And for that we think that, and that's how our business model is set, we have a hybrid model. We believe that we need to manufacture, we need to upscale manufacturing capacity, but at the same time we hold the strongest IP portfolio for this technology. So for any use of perovskite in solar, we hold the fundamental IP. So what we are doing is working with strategic partners in strategic geographies to transfer this technology, either by pure patent licensing agreements, like we've done recently with Trina Solar and First Solar for different markets and different applications. But also we are looking, or we are open to have conversations that go in between the pure patent licensing and the manufacturing, which is technology transfer, which is kind of more aligned with this conversation. We think there is a space to bring this technology, to upscale it, to make it mainstream, and we think that technology transfers or technology collaborations is the pathway forward. Now, I want to highlight that that is a one-way direction. That doesn't build resilience everywhere. It's if we do technology transfer with specific geographies, it brings the technology to those geographies. You could import it, but that doesn't build European resilience per se, the way we understand it today. So I wanted to add that for Europe to also take advantage, it needs to decide how does it want to support its European solar companies and its European champions. And it could be through supporting local manufacturing, to engaging with other parties to do that, but it would be also supporting that technology leadership. There are many flavors that can take, but Europe has to decide how does it want to keep or maintain that leadership position one way or another while it builds that manufacturing base, which doesn't exist at the moment. And the frameworks in place are positive, it's heading in the right direction, but it's going to take longer than we will wish to have a real impact in the existing companies. So I think there is space for everything. There is a win-win for everything. There are ways of doing technology transfer, technology agreements, and also Europe needs to think what is the role it wants to play on that and how it wants to protect their own industrial base.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. With this, I would want to pivot my next question to Mr. Christophe Podevils, who is Secretary General of European Solar Manufacturing Council. My question for you is that you've heard from equipment manufacturers, you've also heard from emerging technologies, and we have seen that Europe is great in technologies, but then how do we shorten the pathway between European innovation and industrial deployment in ISA member countries? How does Manufacturing Council in Europe look at that?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, for the invitation, and for allowing me to join your very interesting discussion. And I would also like to echo the results of the studies provided by the CR Secretariat, but also the study before is very much aligned with our views. The European Solar Manufacturing Council represents about 65 companies active in solar manufacturing in Europe, and this is really along the complete value chain. So I would say we have certainly a say in deployment and also in technology. And what we see currently is, let's say, competition of different objectives. So in Europe, there is the ambition to diversify supply from solar. There's also the ambition to regain production capacity in Europe. And there's the ambition to get solar at very low cost because of the energy transition. So, and what we are seeing is that while technology still exists in Europe, and in certain parts of the technology, Europe is really world leading, when it comes to manufacturing, we see a decline of projects, and we see seas of companies. Still, we have on a European, on the top level, the objective of diversifying, and I think there might be a chance in now for everybody. So when it comes to diversifying, well, India could play an important role as a manufacturing country. It could also, I would say, profit from European knowledge and from European equipment, which is still available. And we hear almost on a, I would say, monthly basis reports from the dominant supplier of the equipment manufacturing that there are export restrictions, or that there are restricted access to latest production technology, and I think that is something Europe can well support with, and at the same time to keep that knowledge in Europe and to also to further develop it. It would be very important to have also manufacturing in Europe itself. And now there's a dilemma now here. We, on the one hand, we are losing manufacturing capacities right now, while on the other hand, we needed to stay up to date with technology. So let's have a small local market, and that might be also a chance for Indian companies to provide manufacturing know-how to Europe. I mean, India did a tremendous work with scaling up module production, also now following with cell production. I think there's something to learn here. And with this partnership, I would say we can reach all the three of the objective. We can stay on top of the technological developments. We can diversify supply, and we can also compete of cost.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. With this, I'll move to the next Mentimeter poll, because you have set a really good base for my next question, Christoph. So answer the next poll, please.
Hello, Gurli. Can I just make a point?
Yes.
Yeah. So just to add to what Chris mentioned. So I mean, of course, it's finally about business, right? People want to have cheap PV plants being installed, but we have to really also understand that now the cost, I mean, the selling price of the module has gone down so much because of the overcapacity. So it's no longer, you can say, a fair playing ground also for the manufacturers which are not non-Chinese. Yeah. Right. Okay. Now India's building will take time, but for European or US, they should also get a fair playing ground to an extent where they get a chance to compete with an overly excess capacity anti-dumping price, which is quite, I would say, not fair in a way. That's why. Yeah.
So, sorry, I've not been clear on that, but of course, I'm also talking about sustainable production costs. So let's assume that the situation of overcapacity and subsidies at a certain time will end.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I think we definitely need a fair playing ground and sustainable costs on this. That being said, so in case, would you support the creation of a European solar manufacturing consortium for partnership with India and other ISA member countries? Okay. 46% strongly support and 38% support, and 3% are neutral, with 4% being do not support. So we'll go with the majority, and my next question would be for Mr. Gaetan Messon from Becquerel Institute, who has been working with ISA as partners on Resilient Solar Supply Chains report as well, and also past editions of CEO Caucus. So Mr. Gaetan, you know the entire conversation about the supply chains that have been happening, and we're talking about a consortium now. So if such a consortium were created, what would it actually look like for you? And I would also like other people in the room to also think about this and also share their opinion. That what would the consortium look like? What are the 3 essential ingredients of such a European consortium? Yes. Over to you.
That's quite a large question. I will start with a very short comment.
I can give you options if you want.
Yes. I will start with a short comment about what I've heard before. If we look a little bit at what has happened in the last 5 years, India and the USA have developed a PV industry almost from scratch. We are the only major part of the world in Europe where there is no PV industry, or almost no PV industry. And I think part of the understanding of what solar is becoming is still missing. I've heard that it's not a critic in the presentation in the previous session, two things that frightens me. One is some people are still speaking about intermittent power for PV. The IEA 10 years ago tried to educate everyone by speaking about variable renewables. And we're still using the word of people who don't think that solar could become a major part of the energy system. And the second one I've heard is about some countries would require more base load. There is no base load anymore with variable renewables. There is a different way of managing the system. And I think there is a lack of understanding that PV is becoming the major source of electricity and energy in the world. And it's not going to happen in 50 years from now. It is already the case now. And the longest we decide to jump in, the more complex it will be to adapt. And it's very interesting to look at opportunities for, I would say, co-shoring. And I would say co-shoring between Europe, India, and a certain number of ISA countries. And there is a strong demand for local manufacturing for very complex things also in Africa. So Europe is still not a lead, but a very good position with regard to R&D and innovation in solar. Of course, Chinese companies are investing so much now that they are a little bit behind, but we still have a competitive edge. We still have, for some technologies, we still have some good opportunities in terms of equipment manufacture. This will not last long. In 5 years from now, if we are not using it, it will have completely disappeared. So there is a need for sharing European IP with companies willing to co-shore. And what is co-shoring? It doesn't mean exporting all the European IP to India to have local manufacturing. No, it's giving the possibilities to Indian and European companies and maybe some African companies to develop together a full value chain where it most makes sense. And one thing that is clearly missing in Europe, it's the willingness from investors to invest in manufacturing. Why? Because on one side, there is still that understanding that it's not so important, solar. Maybe we'll do nuclear, maybe we will reverse course on renewables, you never know. Look at the political debates in many countries. But the second thing is that we are a continent in Europe which is extremely sensitive to investment risk. We are risk adverse. We invest in things that are bringing money for sure. And PV is an industry which is perceived by many investors as risky. And I think by enlarging the markets, so considering India, ISA countries in general, and Europe, we have a much larger market where we could put in place some very interesting elements that would allow investors to consider it less risky. And I will give you a very simple example. There are huge quality issues coming from the Chinese PV industry for the time being. I will give you just one number. Spanish recyclers have received in the last year 90% of the volumes of PV panel they have to recycle, not from PV panels installed 15 years ago, but from PV panels installed 2 years ago. And that's pretty obvious when we see the price at which our Chinese friends have sold PV modules and components. So below their own production cost, at some point, quality was going to be an issue. It's already an issue. And we can decide in Europe, in India, in ISA countries to have stringent quality requirements. This is something that could at least partially support local manufacturing and the local industry. And I will finish with a comment. We had online Mr. Julien Huard, who's the outgoing CEO of NG Energy Access. NG Energy Access is quite an important company with regard to development of renewables in Africa. And one of the comments he sent me this morning, he told me, there is no free trade. We can look at it as we want, there is no free trade. But companies are looking first at price. This is something very important, and that's the reason why we should be able to co-shore PV manufacturing for some steps of the value chain with countries where production costs are lower. But it also told me quality is essential. That's what I was mentioning. And he finished with a very important point. It's a political decision to decide to have a market which will favor our own industry. Thank you for your attention.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Gaetan. I would also like to remark that thank you for sharing the stats for the quality concern, because we have received similar requests and also concerns from our member country, Solomon Islands, which is an island country. And they've also heard that modules are degrading in 2 years' time. It would be great if you can share some more details about that offline, because this is a very interesting point. And in your remarks, you have highlighted local manufacturing, quality of the equipment, European IP, but also collaboration on manufacturing, and most importantly, the investing part. With regards to banks, export credit agencies, all of those things can be added. I would also like to open the floor for a quick 1-minute intervention by other countries or even the members of this group and external partners, that if we develop this consortium, please quickly summarize in 1 minute what do you think can be included in this? What is it that we have not covered till now? The floor is open. Yes, DG, please.
So I hear what Gaetan said in a lot of places, and I will really like some guidance from some of the countries. A lot of you in bilaterals have also said your concerns on quality. How can ISA help? Because there are multiple parts of this quality question. First, were your technical specifications not robust enough on having the right standards? 2, do you lack the testing and measurement labs for getting at least sample surveys? 3, in other countries, there are contractual terms of 10 years warranties for any panels that are found fraudulent. So the OEM supplier gives 10 years warranties. Are those conditions not working? Because I really want some bit of an advice how we can help. We do feel this is our. And my second question, which is to a lot of private sector folks, it's great to get specificity and now look at India-EU collaboration. The challenge we face is that when there are clear opportunities, which are there in our presentation, in Dalberg's presentation, what prevents the private sector of Europe to give their R&D to private sector manufacturers of India? Why is it not happening when the business case is very clear? And for that to happen, is consortium the only approach, or is there something else that should happen organically? Thank you.
I may comment, Director General. There is a need for local production of PV everywhere, in India, in Africa, in Europe, and it's a political need. It will be very important in the coming years to show that for resilience reason, but also for economic reason, that we are able to produce part of what we are using in the energy transition. And it's not only for PV, it's not only for batteries, it's for all the sectors related to the energy transition. If we want to achieve something from an ISA perspective, we could start with quality requirements. Quality requirements are going very far. It's general quality, as I was mentioning, it's also environmental quality. It's CO2 emissions, it's recyclability, and there are plenty of things on which the European Commission has worked and is working for the time being, which could be a base. And I'm coming back to the comments that Mr. Huard was writing to me. He was saying there is no free trade. When it's important, we decide what we want to import and what we don't want. And the goal is not to close completely the door to Chinese imports. We need cheap imports to power the energy transition, but it's making sure that we can have an industry. And European Commission objectives are pretty clear. It's 40% of all components of the energy transition that should be sourced in Europe. It means 60% of the market can remain free. And I think this is also something that ISA could promote. We don't want to put the brakes at the energy transition, but we want to be sure that it will be politically and socially acceptable by developing manufacturing everywhere. And I will have a very small point. When we are saying co-shoring in India, in Africa, in Europe, or in other places, it doesn't mean that we need to have all the elements of the value chain everywhere. It might make a lot of sense to have polysilicon production in one place, to have wafers in the other one, to have a different technology here, different technology there, but to have companies being involved in all three locations. And that's something definitively that we can promote.
Please go ahead.
I just wanted to add a quick point, just to say that Italy actually does work on manufacturing. We have a gigafactory in Sicily, which, as you know, is very sunny. It's called Tristan. The goal is to produce up to 3 gigawatts of panels every year. The factory is owned by Enel, one of our main energy companies, which is, of course, still working on it. It's still getting on the ground. It's a fairly newer project. I think from our point of view, what ISA could do, since you have relations with so many countries all over the world, it's kind of to explain also the risks of like these cheaper options that we've been discussing, which I think we understand that for countries that are smaller, just getting a solar PVs for the first time, it's easier to choose cheaper options. And I think ISA can really, point out the risks and kind of spread information in this sense. Thank you.
Thank you. We are trying to do that through our Star C centers as well. I would like to mention that because we have several testing and standardization facilities. And also this year we've commissioned a report which will talk about quality assurance and harmonization of standards across the globe from start to end, like from installation procurement to the end of life management as well. So thank you for sharing that as well. So because we've been talking about quality assurance, we've been talking about technology, I would also like to put this question out to everyone that how can Europe protect innovation that they are doing while simultaneously enabling industrial scale up in partner countries? That is why this is under Chatham House, so that we can talk freely.
Can I? Yes, I would like to comment on this one. The landscape on IP is changing in solar. So if you think about the last decades, there wasn't that many innovations that were protected. It was improvements of existing solar silicon products. What we've seen in the last few years is an increase on IP protection. Silicon continues to deliver improvements that come with its own IP and its own technology ownership. We can talk about TopCon, we heard about the battles on IP around it, or even now with perovskite. The IP that is invested in perovskite is immense, not just us, but there's a lot of IP there. So how do you protect it? It comes to how do you partner with different countries, different companies, different geographies. There's not a one way. What we've seen is, on our own experiences, for example, China, which historically might not have been that kind of aware of IP. The fact that with new technologies, they are now either licensing or engaging into either protecting or fighting existing IP means that there is a change in mindset. So it means that in general and globally, there is a higher respect for IP. So what we have to do is decide how do we want to use the IP that exists there and how we can have agreements that protect that. And there are many levels. As I said at the beginning, you can think about patents only, but you can also think about packages of technology information that you can transfer. And at the end, it comes to the bilateral agreements themselves. There's not a way for, let's say, a geography or a country to protect it's IP, because the IP belongs to businesses or R&D centers or whoever has created that IP. It's not country-owned, let's put it that way. So I think the risk is lower because the IP awareness is higher for solar, and it's because the landscape is changing. It's about deciding how do you want to use that IP, and again, coming back to who owns it, where are the leaders on technology, because leader in technology is not just delivering it, it's also owning the IP for those new technologies, and how do we want to use that to reinforce this manufacturing, reshoring, collaborations, technology transfers, etc.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I would also like to get a pulse of the room on this. So, Anchal, can we have our next question online? In the meantime, if any other...
You're making sure all of us work for our lunch.
Yes.
Good.
I've been a teacher in my past life. I make sure all students work hard. Yes, so the next question that we have is, what is the most effective model for Europe-ISA technology collaboration? And I would also open the floor for interventions from other colleagues on this as well. Because Dr. Laura has made, yes, please. Please share your name and the country.
Yes, my name is Lena Hasla. I'm from the Norwegian delegation. Just an observation, rather. We're having this discussion here in the European context, but it strikes me that it's crucial that this discussion and the outcome, not the least, in terms of the quality issues, all the investments are taking place, for example, under emission, or is about to take place under emission 300 and other initiatives in developing markets and in Africa in particular. Of course, quality is something we all need. So very important to bring this discussion also into your other partnerships that I know you have.
Thank you. Well noted. More interventions? Yes? Okay, we have results of our poll, and 52% of people in this room think that co-development and R&D partnerships is the way to go ahead, followed by joint ventures. Great. Thank you for sharing that. And with this, I will move on to one of the final polls, which would be, what should be, Anchal, can we move to the next question? Yes. What should be the first priority of ISA Europe working group on solar supply chain diversification? Because we're discussing so much about it. The idea here is that we reconvene, develop this group, and we move forward to developing a consortium approach, as I mentioned in the presentation. Because more than 40% of you agreed that we should move ahead with that approach. So the options are European Turnkey Consortium, Financing and Export Credit Platform, Technology and Innovation Partnerships, Workforce Development Initiative. Very interesting. So 54% people in the room think about technology and innovation partnerships. So I would like to open the floor if anyone would like to share their thoughts on this. What kind of technology and innovation partnerships you're talking about? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Vladislav Kaim, Mission of the Republic of Moldova to the EU. In terms of the formats of the technology and innovation partnerships, one bottleneck that we, for example, in our experience as candidate country to the EU sometimes experience is on the legal and regulatory side. And in that regard, we already launched a mechanism that is unique in the region. It's the regulatory sandbox, the innovation sandbox for the energy sector, where the approved projects can test their innovations in derogation from the existing regulatory framework for up to 7 years. And that could be the format that we could potentially explore when it comes to the partnerships that need to answer to the modern challenges that evolve sometimes faster than the regulatory framework is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more interventions? Yes, please.
Yeah, Gurleen. Yeah, hi. Okay, so coming from the technology perspective, I feel technology is already there. Okay, let's say consider a company like Oxford PV, or you go to Francoise or Ulish, they have the technology. The point is, I mean, now we have to come to like taking it from TRL 3 or 4 to like TRL 7, 8, and say after a few years to TRL 9. So I think the psyche has to be that we have to go to an operation excellence, like taking a technology, running it there in 24/7 production, which is there where, Europe, and as pointed out by one of the gentlemen, was the risk in the investment, right? So because they see a lot of risk. So for example, if there's now a big Indian player which has experience of 3-4 years in manufacturing, they partner with, you can say, a good R&D institute or a potential technology supplier from Europe, that will help them to mitigate the risk. So I think we have to now move, at least in PV, which is a very fast-moving industry, from an R&D or a lab psyche to an operation psyche in a short time, and mitigate the risk from an operation or large-scale production point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. More interventions? Okay, if not, I would move on to the next segment of the poll. Anshul, next question, please. And dear friends, this would be the last poll. So please take out your phones and answer this question. So you will have to type on this. What should be the first focus area of a Europe-India consortium? Financing standards, research. Very interesting. Because we just heard that we have enough research and we need to commercialize it now. Still, a lot of you think that we need more research on this.
And also
financing. Standards, quality standards. Any more responses? I'm going to go on till we hit 30. So please take your phones out. Price and delivery speed. Okay, so in one sentence, and this is the last one, in one sentence, what is single most important action Europe and ISA countries should take together in next 12 months to advance supply chain diversification? Anyone? Yes, please.
See, what we could do is that what we are doing here. My name is Aditya Sharma. I'm from Boson Energy. So what we do is that we allow the excess solar power, which is otherwise getting curtailed, to be used to gasify waste, so that we have got hydrogen out of it, which could be then either stored or could be converted in other output like methanol, ammonia, or in fact power for edge computing. So what we are doing here is trying to expand the horizon and bring in new solutions, so that the difficulties which you are finding now, we could solve it through innovative route. So this is
So, Mr. Sharma, what action you think India, Europe and ISA countries should take together?
Maybe what we could do is that we have to focus on that how the dependence on imports could be reduced.
Okay.
And that's the one action, and then do the innovation around it.
Thank you, and I will move to all the other panelists.
Yeah,
Dr.
Gurleen, so I think what should be done is setting up, like model factories. So let's say in some countries you would go and set up model factories, which would be like a base that will give for the open community of the ISA members. Okay, then they can access it, they can run the production, get good operation experience, and then after it's stabilized, then they could like replicate in other countries so that they get the experience, the know-how, so that it's like not an R&D center, but like an operation center for the manufacturing of like the respective components like cells, wafers, or even I would say silver paste, diamond wire, the encapsulant, so like that. So I would say model factory setting up, I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Peters?
I didn't actually have anything to say. I was helping Laura plot the way to the airport, so I missed the question. I'm very sorry.
Okay. Dr. Laura? Your parting thoughts? What
Yes,
we should
sorry.
do next 12 months?
I need to apologize, but I have to go now.
Okay.
Thank you for the
Sure.
invitation.
Thank you. Mr. Mason?
Yes, just one comment from my side. I'm Andrea Pestarino from Marina. I was very interested by the last question, the last poll. There were a lot of answers, a lot of keywords. Personally, I was one of the financing, but I believe that we can summarize it with one single word, that's sustainability. Sustainability and cooperation in all the points of the value chain of the consortium that you've shown. The idea is that actually, if we make the system sustainable, we can make it sustainable not only from an environmental perspective, but also from financing perspective. We can lower the risk that my colleague here was saying is perceived as high, and we can even go further with new technologies that could even lower the environment and give us more sustainable energy. This is my comment.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all for a very rich and constructive discussion today. And as we have seen, several areas stood out. Now I would like to invite Mr. Asim Anwar on behalf of Embassy of India here to share his reflections on today's deliberations and the shared synergies between India and Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. I also thank the chair and the DG and of course the ISA Secretariat for including this critical topic in the agenda and for framing supply chain diversification not just as a policy aspiration, but as a development imperative with full industry participation. I also thank all the speakers, especially from the industry, who reflected the same view. India's strength in module and cell manufacturing is well known and was discussed with, of course, a large manufacturing scale of about 210 gigawatts in modules and 27 gigawatts in cells. It offers Europe a trusted, cost-competitive manufacturing base outside concentrated geographies. And this was also presented by, in the presentation by Dalberg. However, as noted by others, and in the informative presentation made by Dr. Kaur, there is a very important need to move up the value chain. India has identified the upstream segment, polysilicon, ingots, wafers, and cells as the next frontier of its solar manufacturing push, given that current capacity additions have mainly been in the downstream segment thus far. As was mentioned in some of the presentations, India's production linked incentive, PLI scheme, for high efficiency solar PV modules and associated incentive frameworks have been extended to cover ingot wafer and polysilicon stages, with several large-scale polysilicon wafer projects now under development by Indian industrial groups.
On the research side as well, Indian institutions such as the IITs are working on next generation technologies, along with research on equipment design to reduce dependence on imported manufacturing equipment, which remains a major bottleneck today. Now, this creates a natural opening for India-EU collaboration, and as was mentioned in the remarks made by His Excellency the Ambassador this morning, India and Europe are natural partners in this area. Europe's strength in equipment, wafer ingot technology, and standards, paired with India's deployment scale and manufacturing capacity, provide natural complementarities. Under India-EU Trade and Technology Council, there is, of course, a dedicated working group on clean and green technologies in which further discussion on solar supply chain resilience is very logical. I would like to also share that we are also discussing India's association to EU's Horizon Europe program, which will further cement our research and innovation cooperation. And I can also share that Indian industry in the renewable sector is pretty excited about this. Under the FTA2, integrated India-EU manufacturing and sourcing arrangements in clean energy value chains can support diversification and contribute to further reducing dependence on highly concentrated upstream sources of critical inputs. And as a parting remark, I think the consortium approach is something that requires further deliberation, and I think under the larger India-EU framework, together with ISA, I think this is something that can be definitely taken forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Asim. And finally, to outline our tangible next steps, including the exploration of Europe ISA working group on solar supply chain diversification, I would like to invite DG ISA to present the way forward.
Well, that was googly. I think it's very difficult to give a way forward on this. In fact, JF and I were discussing that there are so many layers of this question that it's not that easy to come with a clear way forward. I would say, compared to last year, we had a session. Gaetan was involved very closely in that year, and now I see a huge clarity. Clarity in terms of more specificity. I always believe as specific as you can for an opportunity, you'll have a better chance of something more concrete. As I see the technology consortium picking up maybe one or two areas on innovation, and that I thought was a little bit probably how everyone viewed the question differently, why more people spoke about technology innovation, because new technologies are a separate domain on innovation, and solar PV is a lot more about European technology consortium. Those are the two things that we must deliberate further. The second is use existing momentum that is coming from especially India-EU FTA and the TTC. Those will be the formal government mechanisms to actually push some of these agendas forward. And the third element is on us to definitely look at the question of quality and standards more holistically. That is, I think, on us to make sure that whether it is Europe, whether it is Mission 300, there is a clear aspects of quality, both in terms of technical standards, then as I mentioned about testing and design, and then making sure contracts have stringent penalty clauses in case of low quality. So those are, I think, the 3 or 4 things that we should take forward. I will say the main challenge on this is private sector of Europe, especially the R&D labs, will have to get into private sector manufacturers of India. And the challenge there is, what is it that you want governments and us to do will have to be defined by private sector. For far too long, I sit in meetings where the opportunities are discussed, but then we keep on discussing those opportunities without actually looking at joint venture possibilities in total. So my urge to private sector is, the private sector of Europe, please tell us what you want. We can also discuss with private sector of India, and there needs to be a forum where private sector matchmaking happens in a much better way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Khagna. Googly played very well. So with today's discussion, we've demonstrated that the future of solar manufacturing will not be defined by individual countries acting alone. It will be shaped by partnerships between governments, with governments and private sector, with research institutions, policymakers, and different stakeholders that are all present here today. By cooperation, as we call it, and by our collective ability to build resilient, trusted, and competitive value chains that support global energy transition. So, on behalf of International Solar Alliance, thank you all for your participation, your insights, and your commitment to advancing this very important agenda. A huge round of applause for all of you once again for playing with the Mentimeter along and very nicely and very enthusiastically sharing your responses. Thank you once again. Over to Chair.
Thank you so much. Now we shall proceed with the next agenda item on preparation